for joining me today. I would just like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal Nation tribes, people of this land, and extending that acknowledgement out all across from the lands that we've joined in Australia, that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name's Jessica Lee Lombroso, and I'm the Landcare Coordinator for Greater Sydney Landcare Network, and it's such a privilege to be here today, inspired by all the amazing people doing incredible stuff and taking interest in our environment and our waterways across Sydney and Australia. And without further ado, Streamwatch is Sydney's longest running citizen science water monitoring program. I've been lucky enough to be brought up with the program at school, to be inspired to take action and to care, and to sit and listen and learn what our landscapes are telling us, to be able to work side by side with Indigenous elders and communities and schools, and to be able to collect data and tell a story and build knowledge and develop community engagement. Streamwatch means so much to so many people, and it wouldn't still be here, the program it is, without the dedicated people contributing. It brings accountability, and I'd like to start off by acknowledging a quote from an Aboriginal elder, Tex Scarthorpe, from Noongar. For each river and waterway near where we live, it is important that we become the community, and our community of responsibility to all these rivers reaches all the way to the sea. One of the challenges is to get all the people to look after this country as if it's their own, and to begin to develop an innate knowledge of the interconnectedness of everything, and look at the best way to look after the country and promote real sustainability. Building these partnerships and developing knowledge together is key, and data is knowledge. Building on a 30-year data set across Sydney tells so many people so many things. Putting the science into stories, if we look at the dynamics of our groups of Streamwatch, we're made up of landcare groups, council bush care groups, environmental groups, schools, and river keepers across Sydney. We collect data and we centralise that data. We're at the moment developing a platform with the Atlas of Living Australia to bring continuity into our program with the Waterwatch program, so that the data is centralised and each year we upload it to the SEED government database. We're looking at our program to make changes to move forward so that we can continue to collect data for the next 30 years, so that our future generations can have a snapshot of what our creeks were telling us at this moment in time, based from 30 years ago. We're looking at equipment, educational resources, and our monitoring techniques. We're bringing in vegetation assessments, water quality, and macroinvertebrates into our database, as well as quality assurance and training, so that our volunteers know how to collect the samples and identify, respond and report. And each year we're doing quality assurance, working closely with vendor, our suppliers, to make sure that the data we collect is within range, so that the data is useful. We're empowering communities from the ground up. As I was saying, water quality, macroinvertebrates and vegetation assessments wouldn't be possible to, it would not be possible to implement these programs without existing programs that are already working, such as the RARC methods, the Rivers of Carbon, the Water Bug Blitz, partnering with Waterwatch and CEN, the Environmental Networks Community Environmental Network, and CHEN, Cat Eye Hills Environmental Network. Yeah, they're here. So that we can continue this program and work with our riverkeepers across Sydney. We've built partnerships with the Parramatta Riverkeeper Group, with the Georges River, the Cooks's River Alliance. We're working with councils in Lane Cove and Hornsby, and we've established a Hawkesbury Nepean Waterkeepers Alliance to create a community voice for our waterways. We're supported by local land services, and we're partnering with the Atlas of Living Australia, Peter Brenton at the CSIRO, and adopting Waterwatch alliances to have power in the project and the program that we do. We are everyday, extraordinary people taking the pulse of the planet. Streamwatch is more than just a tool for data collection. We educate youth. We empower communities through engagement. We monitor and collect the data to be open source from the people for the people. We have a scientific expert panel to guide us with our research and our data for them to be able to use, and policy and governments to look after the health of our environment, because the waterways are the lifeblood of this country. So thank you for joining me today. Did I go too short?
Thank you very much, Jessica. That was lovely. Very short and sweet, which is fantastic because it means we have time for questions. So has anyone got any questions for Jessica today?
Yes.
Very interesting, Jessica.
Hi.
Do you interact with looking at the irrigation and the runoff from agriculture? Because to me that's one of the things that sort of spooks a lot of the water quality. Like there's runoff from cities, which is polluted, runoff from the irrigators. So where's that going?
Well, our program can help assist the EPA and Sydney Water with benchmarking the data that we collect, so that if there are groups across Sydney that have been collecting data, say for example Pew's Lagoon, there was an irrigation extraction and there was no more water left. It was in a heat wave a couple of years ago and a lot of fish and pelicans died, and the Streamwatch data were monitoring flows from a long time. They were fines taken, but they're minimum compared to the damage that's done. But having that data asset can help to know what the normal parameters are, which is invaluable to any action or organisation for accountability. Yes.
So you've got 30 years of data.
It's amazing.
I'm seeing trends and patterns.
We'd like to work, we are working with researchers and academics to analyse the data and look at, there are so many variabilities with environmental data, but the trends and patterns, especially over the urban landscape, it's not just the impact we're having on our waterways, but what councils are doing with urban sensitive water designs or rain gardens and swales, and how we can build our urban landscape to develop more resilience and restoration on riparians, to see if that data in the future changes so that we can see that the things we're implementing work. Yes.
I've just got a couple of questions from our online audience before we take more from the audience here, which is great because we've got the time.
Yay.
The first one is from Sophie Sledge. How is Greater Sydney Landcare supporting Streamwatch?
Well, we've been trying for 2 years to keep our paddle afloat. So a program is only as good as it is funded, and we're so grateful for the funding and the grants that we get, and they're not actually always allocated. And if I had 10 more of me, I could support Streamwatch a lot more. And that's where we want to be. So Streamwatch is actually looking at sustainably rolling our program out through councils and LGAs to be supported by sustainability officers and bush care and the landcare groups that we have and the environmental groups in schools to support the volunteers and teach them and equip them with the skills and knowledge and equipment to be able to collect the data that everyone uses. Because at the end of the day, we all need water.
Thanks, Jessica. We always need those resources too, don't we? And one more from our virtual audience before we go to the face-to-face. What programs do you have available for primary-age children to participate?
Yay! Well, we love all ages, and inspiring kids when they're young is where it all begins. So if you go to the Waterwatch program, Waterwatch New South Wales has amazing education resources online. Google Waterwatch New South Wales. There'll be an educational resource toolkit, and whether you're a community group or a school, high school, primary school, they have programs to implement, and we are working with the Australian A2E2, the Sustainable Schools Network, to be able to implement the Waterwatch program across schools in Sydney. We've actually just bought out new equipment that's safer and quicker and cheaper. So looking at new equipment to measure dissolved oxygen and nitrogen and phosphorus and turbidity without using reagents to make it more accessible and affordable to community groups and schools.
Hi Jessica, Jerry Butler from South Australia. We lost our Waterwatch program quite a few years ago, particularly when the regional bodies came in and disenfranchised communities. What is the main source of funding for your Waterwatch program?
That's a great question, because it differs across the state and the state's government commitment to their citizen science water monitoring programs. So I believe South Australia, Sasha Wells runs the Waterwatch program, and they do have coordinators and funding at the moment, and Wu O'Reilly and ACT running the Upper Murrumbidgee Waterwatch. Here in New South Wales, I'm with Sam Willis and Rachel Naves and Ingrid, and our funding, it was funded by Sydney Water, who gave it to the Australian Museum, and Gladys gave it 100,000 5 years ago. We're at the bottom of our funding buckets, and we get grants through local land services and through a grant competitive process, which makes the program not as sustainable as it could be. If we invested in our water programs across the state, we could deliver at a much better capacity. And Sam and Rachel, my last grant, we shared to roll the program out together so that we weren't having to reinvent the wheel, but be cogs of the wheel working together to collaborate for best outcomes. We're looking at also inviting corporate sponsorship and industry so that corporations can promote and support financially through businesses to be able to educate and empower the community through universities and education to hold that accountability. And it really does come down to funding to have the coordinators to be able to make sure that the quality is to standard and the delivery of capacity. But I've been working with grants and councils and council programs to deliver it school by school and creek by creek and catchment by catchment. Thank you.
I'm just wondering what the biggest challenge you've had with engaging volunteers and actually keeping volunteers to collect the data.
That's a really good question, because it does come down to our volunteers and finding their value in the data. So knowing what the data is being used for and actually making it open source so that it's not just the volunteers collecting the data, but it's the researchers and the planners and the state policy being able to find a data set and an impact and working back from that. So it's about having the time and the capacity to run a lot of our events and workshops, but the beauty is when you've got people that have been working along catchments and riverways for 20 and 30 years that come together and meet each other, they feel like they're not alone doing the same thing and that they are connected. So meeting along the river and meeting with elders and understanding the landscape to connect is that real engagement of the program that brings in the volunteers. Because we teach the difference between natives and weeds and vegetation and water bugs. And when you look at what's actually under the water and what the data means, there is so much to be learnt from each other and the landscape. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Louise Manning and I'm the Secretary for AXA Queensland Chapter, Citizen Science.
Yay!
So how is your data being used to alter behaviour of people? That's what I'd like to know. Because you've got to get it out there in order for people to change, because they have to understand their impact.
So there's a few examples across Sydney over the last 30 years that encapsulate that question. And one of the most inspiring outcomes I found from this program was at Waterways, a Lithgow environmental group. They're at the top of the catchment of our drinking water across Sydney, and Waterways Dam just below it. They're at the top of the catchment and they noticed their electrical conductivity, EC, was extremely high. It should be 350 microsiemens within the healthy guidelines, and I think they were getting readings of 1,500, 2,000 ECs. So they called Ian Wright, a water chemist researcher at Western Sydney University, and he came to the top of the catchment and he went, wow. It was one of those David and Goliath moments where the environmental group had taken that data and taken the coal mine to court to actually change the legislation to bring in electrical conductivity discharge. And that's the real power of these programs and people, of using the data and the knowledge to connect to the right people, to tighten the legislation, to bring accountability and change our culture, because prevention is so much easier than remediation. And there's been examples like that throughout councils. That was just one huge example. Blue Mountain City Council, Lawson Streamwatch, they had turbidity run down their creek from the RTA and the upgrade of the highway, and they were able to use the Streamwatch data to benchmark so that council could get the EPA in to take action so that the RTA could remediate the silt slug in the creek and restore through the community engagement and accountability of the program. I could be here all day telling examples.
Thanks.
So if anyone does want to talk about technical stuff or any funding opportunities or collaboration, or want to know more about how Streamwatch could help their community group or school organisation or environmental network, please get in contact. I'm at Greater Sydney Landcare Network. The website, we encourage everyone to become a member, even if you're not from Sydney, because every membership from every council and every organisation helps us to run the admin and the media and the marketing and the grant writing and everything that makes us wonderful. So I appreciate for you coming here today and helping and supporting and encouraging Streamwatch.
And you're at the stall outside.
And I'm at the stall right outside, and I just want to say how inspiring it is to be in a room with so many amazing people.
And also just our virtual audience, we've got a few more questions.
Good. Yeah.
And we've got time, which is awesome.
Yay!
So Kathy Dawson's asking, what mechanisms do you have to have an integrated approach to stream health through the various bodies you have mentioned? e.g. voluntary groups to federal departments?
So that comes back to the adapted management, understanding Streamwatch, where it started, where it's been, where it's going and where it can be, the fit for purpose of the program and what the community needs from our program and how we can change that to evolve and accommodate. So a big part of that is actually knowing who's using the data, whether it's biosecurity, stopping invasive slugs that get into our waterways and responding to that and being the eyes and the ears out on the ground and working with the people in that field to make our data sets useful for them. So having the platform moving over the data to the Atlas of Living Australia, it was always closed off within Sydney Water and then the Australian Museum. So moving forward, it will be the first time that the Streamwatch data, which is a 30-year data set that started the Waterwatch movement across Australia, will be open sourced and coherent and consistent to be usable. And we've been able to use modern technology to have apps for our database, so no longer pen and paper out in the field in a day of transcriptional error. It's always key to back up our data and write it down, but we will be able to upload it at the field, take a photo from the same spot at the same time and be consistent with our data so that we can work closer with Waterwatch to have a national program where citizen science can fill in the gaps of local government and Sydney Water and the EPA to work together to deliver real response and outcomes.